The Shining series has been underserved for far too long in the West. Over a decade has passed since we've been graced with its presence, and it's fair to say that there's still a real desire to see the Shining games make their way to us, thanks largely to the collective love of the Mega Drive and Genesis RPGs. The Shining series has long since abandoned its origins, from 3D dungeon crawler to turn-based RPG to the actually pretty decent ARPG Shining Soul. The Shining games are now entirely different beasts to those that we loved in the 16-bit era. The same is true of Shining Resonance Refrain, a remaster of the 2014 Japan-only PlayStation 3 release. Shining Resonance tells the tale of Yuma, a young man with self-esteem issues who holds within him the power of the Shining Dragon, an ancient beast of legend that, in a cataclysmic event some 1,000 years ago, saved the world from oblivion. As those of you who played the demo will know, the adventure starts with you in control of Sonia Blanche, a princess knight tasked with saving Yuma from prison, where he is being experimented on by an evil empire. This serves as the game's tutorial, a chance for you to get to grips with the real-time battle system and a means of introducing you to the game's main cast, your controllable in-battle allies and the pantomime-like entourage that make up the villains. A brief walk around town and the game's story is laid bare. There's an evil empire intent on the occupation of the lovely land of Alfheim, previously the domain of powerful but long since diminished dragons and human settlers. The neighbouring elves have allied with Alfheim in an attempt to slow the empire's advance, but it's an uneasy stalemate and it's unlikely to hold. What they need is a hero with some kind of ancient power to stop them. Enter Yuma, aka You, who has the most kick-ass power of them all, an ability to unleash the raw fury of the most powerful dragon in existence. The only snag is, you're a bit unsure of yourself, and scared that your power will do very bad things. So you bottle it all up inside and whine a lot about it, while your friends try to coax it out of you before they all die a horrible death. Good old JRPG times ahoy then. Shining Resonance Refrain's hook then is twofold. 1, you can turn yourself into a dragon for massive damage. 2, and this is where it gets a bit weird, there's a strong musical theme that's central to the game's mechanics. You see, just before the Shining Dragon disappeared 1,000 years ago, he made a bunch of musical weapons called harmonics. Weapons shaped like a harp or guitar, as wielded by Kirika and Aghanim respectively. In Shining Resonance Refrain, you only get one weapon. Instead of buying new kit, you basically tune your weapon to new scores, a process that bestows special base properties to your weapon, things like increased attack speed, elemental attacks, defensive properties, and so forth. The more you use a certain tuning, the stronger it becomes. You can change your tuning by visiting the atelier and submitting new scores via quests, challenges, or story events. Eventually, you'll end up with a range of possibilities to suit your playstyle. It's an interesting system, which is further enhanced by something called aspects. These are effectively different gems that you can socket into your weapon. Increased attack, defense, crit rate, HP percent up, that sort of thing. More powerful tunes allow you to socket more aspects, further adding to the versatility of your character build. Taking your weapon out into the field and you're greeted with a nice, if somewhat simplistic battle system. You can see enemies roaming around in the field, and you simply bump into them to trigger an encounter. Approach from behind for the advantage, and get hit from behind for a movement penalty when the battle starts. Once triggered, battles take place in the exact same spot you were in the overworld. Winning awards you a little slow motion and victory chime interlude, but it's otherwise seamless from exploration. It's almost like an ARPG, almost, but battles are still effectively self-contained, so it's like a halfway house between the two styles. In terms of attacks, you have normal attack, break attack, more on this later, and a choice of forces to use, where hitting the left bumper opens up more powerful MP consuming special attacks. Forces drain MP, while normal attacks replenish it. You're also limited to how many attacks you can execute in a row, thanks to your rechargeable action point gauge. Break attacks are the linchpin to doing excessive damage. All enemies can be broken using break attacks. The more powerful the enemy, the harder they are to break. Essentially, you have to wail attacks on your enemy fast enough to break them, whereupon all subsequent attacks do huge damage during this brief window. Enemies are more susceptible to break at different times, like during casting for example, so learning when to time your break attacks is going to be the key to surviving boss battles. The last two strings to the battle system bow are band and your dragon transformation. There's a massive meter on the left hand side broken into 3 stages. Once a stage is full, you can activate band, which whisks you off to a magical musical interlude which gives your entire party increased abilities, like mad crit rate or increased magic damage. Once your band meter runs out, the effect runs out. Lastly, by hitting both shoulder buttons you can turn into the Shining Dragon. This basically allows you to hit for way more damage, but staying in this state for too long will make you go berserk, which can threaten the safety of your party, so must be used sparingly. All told, the weapon and battle mechanics make for a pleasingly fun battle system. It's a little bit button mashy for the most part, but interesting enough not to make the many encounters you face a chore. Given they're practically seamless to the world's exploration, it's fun enough to ward off any long-term annoyance as your adventure continues. Perhaps the one criticism we do have is that the battles are not overly strategic. Some of the boss battles, especially early on, were surprisingly easy to steamroll just by hitting Kirika's crit-enhancing band ability, immediately hitting the dragon transformation, and then just mashing normal attack for the entire health bar. Not everything can be won this way. We did die a fair amount on some of the tougher encounters, but it is a strategy we found ourselves overusing, which took the gravitas out of some story encounters which we felt should have been a bit more poignant. Initially, we thought we'd be quite down on Shining Resonance. It's hard not to pick out the game's failings, particularly at a time when we're spoiled with excellent JRPGs. In comparison, Shining Resonance Refrain feels distinctly simplistic and often low budget. There's only one town, for example. Marga is the hub from which all activity takes place. There are not many locations in the main town either, and there are no internal locations to explore, with only 2D artwork and visual novel style exchanges to signify that you're at the inn or the castle, basically the only 2 places in town that you ever really go inside. Cutscenes are at a minimum too, with some battles being depicted by a black screen and coloured sword swipes to indicate some action has taken place. Side quests are also pretty uninspired, kill X things, bring me Y things, and often repeat themselves, and you're often sent to the same locations on multiple occasions. Yep, make no mistake, this is not a game that Sega has lavished attention on. It's very much a last-gen JRPG in every sense. But you know what? We don't really care, because somehow, despite its failings, low budget, and avalanche of cliches, we actually find ourselves enjoying it. Xenoblade 2, for all of its majesty, is a big game, a big game. So much detail, so much exploration, frankly so much time. That game ate our entire Christmas holidays. We loved it, and we love big JRPGs, but sometimes we often don't have time for them. This Shining Resonance Refrain review has benefited from that fact. Yes, it's streamlined from budgetary constraints, but actually in doing so, it's a JRPG that cuts out a lot of the fluff and just cuts to the chase. And that is hugely convenient for us. It's not overly bogged down with overlong dialogue exchanges. You're never sitting through more cutscenes than you're comfortable with. Battles have no loading to speak of, and you're never wasting time searching every house in every town for pots, chests and herbs and whatnot. There's another unexpected bonus there too. Refrain also contains the original PS3 release's DLC. All the uniform, maid and idol costumes are in there from the word go, which is nice, of course, but also something else, something very smart, the Grimoire dungeons. By chapter 3, right next to the save point in Marga, a woman appears who can give you access to distortions. These are basically randomised dungeons. But here's the clever bit. From her menu screen, you can build your own themed dungeon. The basic template is a variety of dungeons, locations at E rank. However, you can spend special gems on the dungeon template to, say, add a specific enemy type. Some special gems may give twice the gold yield, but penalise you with twice the AP cost. Adding these gems with different effects plays around with the dungeon's attributes, allowing you to increase the dungeon rack from A to D to C and so forth. The higher the dungeon rank you make, the harder it is, it also scales with your level, but also the greater the reward from the chests at the end, when you beat all 3 floors. Now normally we're big grinders in RPGs. To have this option right next to your save point in the main town is amazing. The Grimoire dungeons yield more XP than normal areas in the game, so it's a great place to level up if you only have, say, 30 minutes to dip into it one evening. It seems like a small thing, but in the same way that these things like low budget, cliche-heavy dialogue and simplicity strive to work against Shining Resonance, there are enough nice bonuses that help to tip the balance. The Grimoire dungeons, the cute characterization, we really rather like the simple dating mechanic for example, and true to tropes though they are, the allied cast is certainly likeable in a sweet and naive kind of way. Maybe we have simple tastes, but we really warm to them. Last but not least, and as a final sweetener, Gynus and Excella, secondary but no less charismatic members of the original cast, become playable in the all-new Refrain mode, which is a nice little extra for those partial to a second playthrough, especially if you find yourself engaged in the characters and storyline first time around and want to experience a different facet to the game's story. All told, we struggled a little with this Shining Resonance Refrain review, as it's something of a mixed bag. The game design is stifled by an obvious lack of budget, it never proves to be as rich and polished as the likes of Persona 5, and it's often very workmanlike and unremarkable. But even in the face of all of that, we still found Shining Resonance Refrain to be a highly enjoyable JRPG. It's bright and breezy in outlook, and it never takes itself too seriously. It's just a lovely, light-hearted, easy-to-play adventure. If, like us, you often struggle to finish a JRPG these days, then Shining Resonance Refrain offers something less dense, more manageable. It's a simpler, more streamlined experience, yes, but in all honesty, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.